All right, this is your host Win here. We're looking at our featured war today. This would be the war between 412 and 712. It was pretty funny because, this kingdom actually called me out on one of my predictions. And basically, what had happened is they managed to turn the war around and win it. Although it was still a pretty tight war. I mean, closer look at things would reveal otherwise, however. So that's why we're looking at this war today. It's definitely a war people were talking about. It's definitely one I was criticized over, as you can tell by the banner in the left-hand corner. It was actually 712's banner. After I released the podcast, indicating maybe it was a good time for them to surrender, around kind of the midpoint there. But as you can see, they managed to turn it around. So let's jump into this war and see what was behind the scenes. Now we have a little bit of a limited information with regards to this war, as opposed to, basically our next war that's coming up. As you can see here, I've added the YouTube chat box here, so we can now see when people are typing things. I'll be able to respond to that. So I hope to see some listeners in there at some point, and we can respond to some questions possibly. So I just have the two kingdoms open here, and I have my little notepad open here as well with information pertaining to the war. Let's dive right in and talk about dragons. As you can see here on my notepad, there is quite a few dragons. February 21st, we see that emerald dragons are being sent, and another emerald dragon is being started. So 412 is sending emerald dragons. Um, but it looks like, of course, 712 is also sending dragons. 412 seems to be a big fan of the Emerald Dragons, and whereas it seems like 712 is slinging Ruby Dragons, and now a Topaz Dragon. Um, another Emerald Dragon begun ravaging. Now they're starting a Ruby Dragon project. I've already lost count of the dragons. There's a lot of dragons in this war. Sailor Moon has completed our Dragon Bling Bling. Ruby Dragon targeted endgame at 412. And of course, here 412 is sending Ruby Dragons back at them as well. Looks like Topaz Dragons are now going at 412 again. My thought here is that, they're going for that econ destruction, possibly running some kind of chastity wall. Lots of fireball damage, no doubt. Would be nice to have some KD econs on this side, but we're limited as to what the Kings were willing to provide. However, we do have some war summary data here. This war summary is from the winning side. So you can see total attacks made, about 1,000 acres difference. Some massacres definitely on both sides. Definitely more coming from the winner here. Several failed attacks. Not sure what that was all about. No need to ask. Uniques, definitely more uniques as well. I mean, looking at the land exchange, I've broken this down later so we can take a look at this a little bit better. But as you can see, quite a good number of attacks have been dealt back and forth. Um, you know, 142 hours worth of attacks, almost 6 days. That includes these numbers include um, pre-war as well. These are the numbers with just the war only. As you can see, the attacks are slightly different. Acres are actually on the enemy side of things, as you could tell. Pre-war made a huge difference as well. Um, it seems like just the war only acres were lost here. But provided we have all the data here again, some massacres happened outside of war. So it's interesting to note. If you look at the war uniques, not a huge difference, but 30 is still a good difference here. Again, looking at the numbers down here, I broke it down later on, but we're just going to take a quick look at the uniques here. Okay, 712, 16. I mean, that's pretty awesome. Monkey, Luffy, or good province. Same with Full Metal Alchemist. These top three, four provinces are kicking butt on 712 side. These four not too far behind, and the rest of the core are 9 or 10. To the enemy's side here, 412. more kind of in the 8 or 9 range, and 10, not too many provinces, not as many provinces standing out. Um, as compared to 712 side of things. It's just some highlights down here, and I have some other notes as well. We're just going to take a quick look at the kingdoms here. As you can see, 412 has actually had some resets in the meantime. They've got one province down there, one province down there. Now it has been some time. They did reset out of protection several provinces. I think it was a total of 4 or 5. I mean, it's pretty evident in their net worth and net worth per acres here that these provinces either took serious damage, whereas this guy's concerned, or they were reset. I do have a little bit more data from earlier on before they came out of protection, as opposed to 712 over here. Um, as you can see, the land and net worth wise is significantly less damage, significantly more net worth per acre. Clear victor here. On this side, let's take a quick look at some of the charts that I have here. We normally like to look at KD land first of all. So here's our KD land. As you can see, it's a pretty tough battle, but always, 412 kind of maintaining the land lead until the end there, which was evident by the data that we were looking at in the war summaries. Now moving on to the net worth side of things, it's hard to tell. Unfortunately, this data was grabbed quite some time after the war had already ended. But I mean, you can still kind of see the net worth lines here as compared to the taunt banner that they so kindly put up for me to notice. Thank you so much, 712, for watching the podcast, and 412 as well for watching the podcast. I definitely appreciate these community initiatives, let's call them. I love top banners. So both sides, all wars, I would like to see more top banners. That would be awesome. And again, as you can see here, it started off 412 was extremely strong, the blue line. Um, and they were doing a significant amount of damage. However, they weren't able to lock it down in the end, and ended up losing their footing, all into the end after this taunt banner was issued. Looking at the honor, it tells a similar story. Blue is more or less in the lead. However, somewhere around min time, it kind of flips over here on them, and they start losing the honor side of things. Still a very tight battle. Definitely nobody gave up easy on this one. I want to take a moment just to do a quick little review of the some formatted news that I have here. Um, this particular page is a combination of the summary news and the land sorted versus, excuse me, sorry, of the target finder here. So I just kind of, put in who was, how much marches and how many marches were taken, and sent out versus each province. So you can kind of see what the focus was here. So I mean, the smaller provinces here in the 400 range, I mean, some of them are sustaining up to 54 hits, 53 hits. I mean, that's pretty significant. I mean, this guy's, notable up here, Martian. It looks like, he took more hits than he made, but he's still able to stay around, well, second biggest province in the kingdom. Again, several of these provinces take in more hits than they've made and still in a fairly decent position. So definitely some skill there on the player's part on 412. I mean, looking at the focus here, it looks like fairy, avian, orc, dwarf avian, fairy avian, are all the small range. But again, this kingdom took a pretty serious beating, except for Chairface Chippendale. I mean, plus 652 acres. This avian looks like he was just running away all war. Looking at his net worth, it definitely looks like he was out of range at some point during the war, possibly. He has a pretty high net worth per acre as well, so definitely one to watch out for. That player especially, that will be their cow going forward. Looking at the 712 side of things, I have the same kind of setup here. I changed my text a little bit, so I apologize if it's a little bit tougher to read. We're still working on formatting and things like this, so of course any and all feedback is welcome. Taking a quick look at the damage here on this side, fairy orc, avian orc, or it seems like there's a lot of orc focus from 412 with regards to damage on the 712 side of things. So, it's interesting to see what the focal point was here of the enemy. I mean, looking quickly back at the 412 news again, what's at the top here? This avian, some ferries, basically their TMs are the only things that survived in terms of land. But they still took a good number of hits. Everyone took a good number of hits. Again, these are out of protection wars, so there's not too many pure TMs or TMs really to mention in this war. However, there are some here. I do have some notes with regards to this war um, from some of the other warcasters, basically revolving around our discussion here today. Just a moment here. I'm going to pull them up while we look at this. Um, so basically, we were kind of looking at the war, and I was speaking to Smiles, and he mentions, um, why did 712 lose 120K net worth in protection, lost two provs? Um, we're looking for sub races and things like that. We found out later that 712 was mostly on universities. 412 wasn't really seeing too much love for dryads, and we're considering re-rolls even. Smiles went on to comment that Dryad's biggest bonus comes from pure EPA. Um, and of course, he says that they're not the greatest coming out of protection. We're looking at the 412 makeup. We're looking at dwarf dryad, dwarf undead, avian dwarf, fey dryad, fey halfer, fey elf, one avian, and one avian halfer. 712 has two avians, two dryads, three dwarfs, one elf, six fairies, two halfers, three humans, six orcs. A pretty solid TM core, or will be later in the age. Reports state that either half of the humans, most of the attackers were either half human or half dwarf, and there were two dwarf gnome hybrids, which were apparently a real pain to deal with. Those gnomes, as I mentioned in the pre-age chats, a very tough customer, and I would like to see more of them playing in this age. But to each their own. So I hope that we do get to see gnome with come back next stage with similar bonuses. I'd like to see more players play it, but again, it's entirely up to your play style. Um, again, going back to Smiles' conversation with myself, Avians and Dryad, he says both struggle out of protection. Speed and horses is a big issue. Even Dwarf is pretty meh out of protection, according to Smiles. So a lot of mediocrity for out of protection there. Um, you know, According to the 412 Monarch, he mentioned things such as dwarf, norms are sitting on 150 acres, all offense, no defense, 3 TPA, trading soldiers like crazy. I mean, we did see a lot of aid going back and forth from their news. They couldn't even get desertions for overpop because of the aid. They kind of gave up on chaining a little bit. That's probably what happened around min time because the overpop wasn't working so much. Again, when 712 started taking the war, they were using a chastity wall to shut down the econ, and then took big swings up to take out attackers. The ritual was actually an issue for these kingdoms. Reports indicate that 712 was only riding on an affluent ritual of about 50% effectiveness, while the reports show or seem to indicate that 412 may have not had a ritual at all. Definitely not a good sign for them. And with dragons going back and forth, ritual play can be very important, especially in those out of protection wars. It definitely gave an advantage, affluent to income, but most importantly to draft. Um, Looking at some notes with regards to FFW or SAPS, he had some comments, very strong comments with regards to Fade Dryad. Picking the highest offensive elite and highest defensive elite choice, you end up with a 13-11 elite who have bad TGs, bad return. You have an assortment of spells which don't rely on MWPA, which is the strength of Fey. He goes on to say you're wasting all of your powers of Fey and powers of Dryad. Worse, the Fey spellbook isn't too much different from Dryad, he says, and you end up doubling bonuses which don't matter. My response to that was, well, do you think, they're trying to capitalize on Tog and a Dryad income if they were ever to make it to the top, cows? I mean, looking at the combo, it looks like maybe, support caster that kind of turtles at home. might be good for an income project. To which Saps replies, no, that's a really bad idea. There's not enough mana to work with for that kind of tog plate to take place, especially when you're doubling as a support caster, and that's provided you don't get fireballed or kidnapped to death anyways. I mean, when you get up to the top there on a low MWPA, so he says this combo is for the trash bin. Definitely maybe not the best synergy between the two. I think they're kind of spread thin. um, it kind of makes sense if you want to pump out GC later on and cast support spells. I mean, conveniently, if you can just sit at the top untouched, sure, it might be a great province, but getting to that position, it's 90% of the work. So, if anyone is playing Fey Dryad, be more than welcome to talk about your selection and how you're playing it and how it's working out for you this age. Definitely not a big fan on our side here with regards to its capabilities and playability for the average player. With regards to 412, FFW Saps goes on to say the kingdom was kind of all over the place with no real plan. Um, you know, it's too much of a mixed combination of races. The kingdom kind of just looks jumbled a little bit. Um, basically looking at the world, only about 1%, I believe, picked that combo of Fey Dryad. Um, Saps goes on to say, 412 is saying, hey, please come farm me because I can't chain a province properly, so you can get free wins by warring me. Um, with that setup apparently screams that. I mean, I could see that definitely looks like it's a little bit jumbled. And as I said, it does look a bit stretched thin. We kind of weaker on offense and defense versus your pure combinations. Orc, avian, avian, or even just a dryad, dryad. Not saying that those could necessarily be played better, but it comes down to decision making. Um, you know, the affluent thing was definitely a huge factor, and then in dealing with the dragons and being able to slay those dragons, everyone always wants more troops and more income. FFW goes on to say, Saps goes on to say, affluent is the current best ritual for out of protection with Persian's age changes. I personally think affluent is probably one of the best rituals to exit protection or out of protection with. Definitely one you could work towards, and if you enter it, the war and play your attackers right, play your moves right. There's almost no way you could lose a war as long as you're prepared and you have a plan. Um, we're looking at dwarves, extra production, and how that might help into getting more rituals casted faster. Um, you know, Ritual is pretty important. Saps goes on to say you can win a war by having one-way dragon on you. One-way dragon isn't the same as a one-way ritual, and the ritual depends again. It depends which ritual you're running. You can still lose easily if you run a dumb ritual. He says, I've seen a lot of expropriation rituals or benediction rituals where kingdoms are a little bit too cocky, and it ends up losing them the war when they run on something like that. Um, Saps goes on to say, now this is him being nice. Um, if Utopia University exists, the war lead of 412 should attend it. Me personally, I know who the war lead is on both kingdoms and who they are. Definitely, it's a funny story talking to the monarch of 412. Just a funny situation, kind of an inside joke. You kind of have to know who they are to understand it, but it should become more apparent later in the age. So definitely an interesting war to look at. I do apologize for not having necessarily all the best data with regards to this war, but we will be looking at the Barco War tomorrow with crosswords with significantly more data on the subject. Unfortunately, we started tracking this a little bit late, and it was brought to our attention a little bit too late while we were trying to play catch up. That notwithstanding, it was a great war. Congratulations to both sides, especially to 712 for proving me wrong and pulling back from a war that seemed like it was definitely in 412's hands. Congratulations and best of luck for everyone in the age. Again, it's still anyone's age. Thank you so much for everyone reaching out to me. Thank you to all the viewers. Thank you to Muga for supporting me in these endeavors. And keep an eye out for the next Warcast coming up on June 7th, year one. That'll be tomorrow. kind of with a tied back-to-back review of the target finder, as well as a look at the Barco and Crosswords war. Again, we'll have significantly more data to go over and possibly some commentators that will be part of that as well. Thank you everybody for watching. This is your reporter, Wayne.